Lights. Welcome. Thanks for coming and on this gorgeous sunny day. And I apologise to anybody who tried to come last week because we had to reschedule because we wanted to support the strike for repeal. So apologies to anyone who didn't get notification on that. So today it is my absolute great pleasure to introduce the two new co-directors of the Abbey Theatre, Graham McLaren, who hails from Scotland, and Neil Murray, who's from Wales. So I'll leave it at that.
That was perfect.
Incidentally, I'm Graham. I'm the Scottish one. We thought we would start by talking about what attracted us to give up our happy lives to come here and be even happier. And because we both have families, and it wasn't a decision we took lightly, and so it was worth kind of also reminding ourselves what are we doing here, and it is in essence. Come on in, take your time. Oh, that sounded like a criticism, I didn't know. In essence, it's really the Abbey. It's the idea of the Abbey Theatre as history, its place in world theatre. And I don't mean that necessarily in the history books, but what I mean by that is, the whole kind of endeavour of making theatre starts 2,500 years ago, and it's essentially a great big civic discourse that gets turned. They reckon that the best form to really get the nuance is to give it to different voices, and the drama starts there as a civic debating forum, really, and the Greeks really understood that, and it's evolved. But there are a few cases over the history of those 2,500 years where the civic responsibility of the theatre is central, and so you could talk about l'Odéon in Paris before the student riots. You could talk about the royal court from time to time. But the one theatre genuinely, Moscow Arts, bless them, yeah. I mean, there are a few, but none come close to the kind of civic engagement that the Abbey Theatre has. And so, as theatre makers, as practitioners, from another country, another culture, we were really attracted to come to a place that had that took that responsibility seriously. So there's famous instances, of course. We talk about the riots, the Playboy riots, and the riots at Plough. Latterly, there's been a few in the Peacock as well, but it's not just that. It's the idea that in that auditorium, civic discourse can happen. The lights go down, and a congregation, but it's not just a congregation. It's not a bunch of people on receive. It's a bunch of people with unquiet minds. Anyway, so that's kind of what attracted us in a way. Do you want to?
I was always also intrigued that I'm Neil, I'm the Welsh one. Although I lived in Scotland longer than I lived in Wales, so the accent's diluted to a certain extent. Sorry about Friday. Sorry, apologies. No, I am really sorry. I genuinely am sorry, believe you. I was also interested as somebody who'd been working in theatre for 25 years or so or more. Who'd been coming over to Dublin and indeed had brought work to Ireland and also had run a theatre, which we'll talk about later, I suppose, but run a theatre in Glasgow where I'd also worked with a lot of Irish artists. And the Abbey, whilst it was kind of nominally at the heart of everything, I suppose, I often somehow felt outside of it. When I was visiting Dublin, I wouldn't always go to the Abbey. Certainly over the last maybe 10 or 15 years, I suppose I would be seen more, particularly around places like the Theatre Festival. I'm more likely to be in the project, or I might even be seeing Pan or Latterly Dead Centre. So I was kind of intrigued, and I had great memories of going to the Abbey, and I'd seen a wonderful production of The Crucible with Owen Rowe in it, I think, in the previous auditorium style. But it had slightly slipped off my radar, and that was as much my fault as the Abbey's. But it just suddenly, it wasn't as present, I suppose. And living in Scotland, where we have the behemoth that is the Edinburgh Festival, you'd see lots of companies coming over from Ireland, but not so much the Abbey. So to me, it felt like there was a sense of this as Graham's put this theatre that occupies this hugely important place in both world theatre and particularly in Irish culture and indeed the Irish life. But it had slightly dropped off my radar, so it was kind of interesting to reignite that and see, well, what's happening at the Abbey? What do we think? Is there a different way to do things at the Abbey? Perhaps is the Abbey ready for a change? Does the Abbey want to change? So we asked ourselves all of those were the questions that we were asking ourselves as our figure hovered over the send button of should we apply for this? Yeah. And the question of applying together was an interesting thing as well. In that I think we both were aware. I mean, we were both working at the National Theatre of Scotland at that time. I was the executive producer, and Graham was an associate director there. So we were both aware that it was a well-known. It had been much discussed in British theatre as much as Irish theatre, that the Abbey was looking for new leadership, and I think we'd both kind of looked at it individually and slightly backed off it, and I think there was something quite. Probably even more terrifying coming in from the outside on your own, and we just kind of we did a lot of work together, particularly the year of the Scottish independence referendum. We worked on a lot of projects together.
The last one.
Is there another one? No, that'll never happen. It's a once in a lifetime thing. Once in a generation. And it was actually, I think, Graham's wife who kind of said, actually, instead of both talking about individually, why don't you talk about doing it together? And that kind of, I suppose, gave us the courage, I think, because there was, there's something very humbling about inheriting the Abbey and everything it means, and also something very challenging about that. Mm-hmm. And there was and there is a comfort to go at the end of a very particularly difficult day that two of you go for a pint rather than go for a pint on your own. It helps. It helps.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, I suppose that's the advantage, because it's incredibly attractive, but it's also famously incredibly complex. So it is easier if you're doing it with your pal. I couldn't find any pals, so I asked Neil, and see what I did, Neil. So we should maybe talk a little bit about, therefore, what we were doing, what kind of leads us to, what led us here, what paths we took.
Tell us about your childhood career.
Oh, thank you very much. No, I won't, but I will talk a little bit about the kind of path that you, because you don't set out to run a national theatre. If you're in here saying I'm going to run a national theatre, don't. Just, that's not a good healthy. And so we're here kind of by accident, and also we're kind of here in also in Ireland as well. I feel like some time traveller has stood on a cockroach and altered, the space-time continuum, and we've kind of found ourselves here. Because my trajectory was pretty straightforward. I wanted to be an actor. I trained as an actor, and
He was terrible.
I was a fantastic actor.
Terrible actor.
And
A lot of hair tossing, as I recall.
I don't know, but it was really that, and then I realised after just a couple of years that the job. And the actors in the room will understand this feeling that you're the last to be consulted in anything. And if at all, you're often just instructed to do something. And that became an increasingly frustrating place to be as an artist, where you think of yourself as a relatively creative individual and with opinions and a voice. And this is where it starts to kick in for me, where I start to say, I have a voice. I have to find a platform for that voice. And so I started a theatre company after just a couple of years at drama school. And that company took off a lot quicker than I'd anticipated. And before long, we were touring the world. Literally within 2 or 3 years, we were on long-haul flights representing the country, and by that I mean the UK. And there's nothing that quite prepares you for that. And I suppose running a company, you start to realise that your ideas and your values are all you have. That's what you're selling, really, and the values being what kind of work you want to make, why you want to make it, and. Then I found myself not running that company. I ran the theatre in Perth for a short time at the same time as running the touring company. And then funding being what it is, I threw my toys out of the pram and went home to my wife one night and said, I know you think I have 2 jobs, and from tomorrow I'll have none because I'm going to leave both. And I went to Canada and spent a little bit of time there, and that was transformative because that allowed me to reconnect to being an artist and not just a kind of artistic director. All that to say, I find myself thinking weirdly, my wife is Irish, and weirdly thinking about 5 years ago, I think we should go and live in Ireland. And we were about to put the house on the market in Glasgow, and a phone call comes in from Vicky Featherson, then Artistic Director of National Theatre of Scotland, and she said, could you come in and see me this afternoon? And I said, no, I can't because I've got an estate agent coming round. We're thinking of moving. And I don't know if anyone's ever met Vicky Featherson. It's like Bewitched, really, you know, she did that thing, and I suddenly found myself calling the estate agent saying, no, don't come today, I'm going to... And I went in and I met Vicky, and she said, I'd like you to join National Theatre of Scotland as an associate director, because John Tiffany, whatever happened to him?
No good. No good came of him.
John Tiffany was taking a sabbatical, and so the idea was I would go in for 9 months or a year, and then I could go. I'd be free to go back, do what I want. And she said an amazing thing. I was kind of grumpy. So I don't know. I don't know that I should go and join this company. I said, what would the job entail? Have I ever told you this?
Don't
know. What would the job entail? And she said, well, I think it's important that you have your own ideas and projects and you come up with those. And she said, but really, if you think I'm going to make a disastrous fuck up, stop me. That will be your main job. Stop me. I tried.
You can't stop her.
You can't stop her.
She's unstoppable.
Not that she made any disasters,
yeah, no,
but
she's unstoppable.
So I found myself there for 5 years and rekindled a friendship, a 20-year friendship with you, and And at that point, we towards the end of that, round about the year of the referendum, the first referendum, I should catch on, that we increasingly found that our social and political aspirations were the primary conversation that we were having, and that the work that we increasingly wanted to create and to enable others to create was work of a certain type. And so we found, therefore, that the opportunity of the Abbey, God's sake, at the same time as us in Scottish Opera Cafe talking about those things, it seemed like so strangely, it feels like all paths have been leading me to here, strangely.
Thanks for coming, everybody. Jesus Christ, how long was that? There's a clock up there. Can you not read it?
I think you'll find that was 3.5 minutes.
Okay. I'll be briefer. I probably won't be now.
No, you won't.
You'll be timing me now. My path is very different in that sense, in that it really wasn't... I mean, theatre was formed really no part of... I wasn't somebody who wanted to be an actor. I didn't go to youth theatre. I grew up in Newport, a steel town in southeast Wales. My father was a steel worker. My mother was a shop worker. There was no theatre in the town where I grew up. There is one now, but it does very little work. I went after a few sojourns with the education system. I ended up going to a Manchester Polytechnic. For those who remember Polytechnics, they were a great thing in England. I went to Manchester Polytechnic primarily because I was a Manchester City fan, when they were rubbish, I hasten to add, and because of Factory Records and Joy Division and all those Manchester bands. And I played in bands. I was either going to be in a band or I was going to write for the NME when the NME was really cool back in the day. After 2 years in college in Manchester doing a kind of economics/business course, which I was, it's fine. I was cruising through it. I went to London for a year to work. We used to do this thing called sandwich degrees, which were great. You sandwiched a year of working in between 3 years of study. I went to London, and for my sins, I worked for the London Borough of Newham Finance Department. This was before Newham got the Olympics. This was in Stratford East, as was. The building's still there. It's a pyramid building. And I used to stamp invoices for road repairs in Newham, which wasn't particularly stimulating. But I was in London, and I spent most of my time going to see gigs all over London. But while I was there, I thought I should go to the theatre. I've never been to the theatre. Why don't I? One night I'll go to the theatre. And I think it's still there. In Leicester Square in London, there used to be the ticket booth where it's a bit like the Times Square, where they'd sell off, any tickets that hadn't been sold, they'd sell them at a discounted rate from 5 o'clock. And this was in the early 1980s, and I got a ticket for £3 to see The Accidental Death of an Anarchist by Dario Fo, the original London production by a company called Belt and Braces, who were one of those great British left-of-centre with 784, Monstrous Regiment, all those companies. Belt and Braces were another one of those. And I went to see it in Wyndham Theatre on Charing Cross Road. And it was a proper life-changing experience. I sat there and watched. I didn't know what I was going in to see. And it was funny, and it was political, and it was urgent, and it felt like a story that had to be told. And I left the theatre just saying, to myself, I was on my own, nobody else was going. Saying
out loud,
so who would listen to me? A life in the theatre back. Whatever, I don't know what it is, but I want to do something to do with that. And I genuinely didn't know what it was. And I went back to Manchester, finished my degree, started working in theatres. I was an usher at the Palace Theatre in Manchester, which was a big #1 house. And the single best advice I ever got came from a brilliant woman called Hazel Crisp, who was the company manager of the Royal Exchange Theatre in Manchester, which is a beautiful kind of space module dropped into a beautiful 18th century old stock exchange in Manchester. And I was working on stage crew at the Royal Exchange. And if you were on stage crew at the Royal Exchange, If you go online and look, it's in the round. Everybody sees you. So the stage crew at the Royal Exchange, we thought we were rock stars. We were bigger than the actors because everybody could see you clambering around the basket and doing stuff and, making things work. And it was a proper glam job, and I was completely useless at it. And one day, the brilliant Hazel sat me down, and I'd just come off a disastrous... I'd done something terribly wrong, but no, everybody seemed to think it was all fine. And I thought I could be like a stage manager or like a production manager. I like this. Seems good. And she said, Neil, the thing is, everybody really likes you, and you're really enthusiastic, but you're dangerous on stage. And I left heartbroken, licked my wounds, went back to the palace and ushered and ran the bar, and I became a front of house manager. That was what I did, and from that I worked at the brilliant Citizens Theatre in Glasgow as a front of house manager there, and more I started getting interested in people didn't really talk about theatre producers very much in those days. It was really the West End had producers, but nobody else really talked. We were administrators and general managers, and I think the word is overused sometimes now, but I started just getting this real interest of how everything came together, and also the influences that makes great theatre. That sense, I suppose, of not the single art form of how does film influence theatre, how does visual art, how does music. Because I've always had this thing that as consumers, we consume all of those things. There are very few people who only go to the theatre. Most people who go to the theatre love literature, love film. And I was starting to get frustrated that where I was working, the places I was working, those influences never seem to influence what happened on stage, and it would become a very stagnant art form, I suppose, or it felt like it was becoming a stagnant art form. So for me and my role, which is as a producer, I suppose, what I've always tried to do is to bring in all the different influences of the things I love and I see around me and I follow to bear in theatre, and that journey eventually led to being the originating producer for the National Theatre of Scotland, which was with Vicky Featherstone as the director, which was this kind of theatre without walls model, a national theatre that didn't have its own building, that made its work wherever it could find the space to make the work or where it chose to make the work. And the big attraction for me, prior to that, I'd run the Tron Theatre in Glasgow for around 10 years, which is a beautiful old 18th century Adam church. And I'd loved that, but so I'd gone from running a building to having no building at all. And what I loved about the idea of the Abbey, I suppose, was to try and bring the two things together, to go back to that thrill of running a theatre where you get to know the audience gets to know the work, you get to know people individually in the foyer, but you also build a culture around what that theatre's doing. And at the same time, we were kind of charged by the board of the Abbey to bring some of the ideas and the thinking behind the National Theatre of Scotland into the Abbey. So, our programme, I hope, will start to reflect some of those ideas about work not being confined, not just to the building on Abbey Street, but not even to Dublin, making work all across Ireland. So that's the big challenge, but it felt like an amazing opportunity. So that's how I ended up there. 7 minutes.
Yeah,
sorry.
It was.
Sorry. Apologies.
Do you want to talk, therefore, a wee bit about the challenges then that as the first, so we're the first people to be appointed to run the Abbey that are not from the theatre community here, and the challenges in that. And do you want to talk about that, Neil?
The challenges are...
You made it sound like it was a difficult question.
It's a really difficult question because you address it all the time. We address it day to day. It is, I suppose, what's really fascinating coming to Ireland, and I was aware of this before, but the history and the legacy of theatre, and particularly playwriting in Ireland, is enormous in a way that it isn't in Scotland, and it certainly isn't in Wales. England has a bit more of it. And I suppose it's how does one respect that, but without revering it so much that it constrains you? And it's how can we make the Abbey? How can we make the Abbey believe? I'm going to steal one of your lines. Sorry. How can we make the Abbey believe that its best days are ahead of it, rather than behind it? And I think there's a time, because the Abbey does have a glorious history, like in your intro, as you pointed out, pretty much like not many of the theatres in the world can can tell the story the way that the Abbey has. But now it's about, well, how do we harness that, and how do we harness that memory of, how radical was Playboy, how radical was The Plough and the Stars, and all those great plays, but also what was absent? Where were the women in that story? What happened to that part of the story? How do we make that story the new story of the Abbey? How do we reflect an island that looks completely different now to the Abbey's glory days, if you want to look back that far? So the challenge is, how do we bring these new ideas? And I think that thing I was just touching on. How do we open up the Abbey to the extraordinary other artists working in Ireland from across different art forms, and make that National Theatre, which the Abbey is, a kind of a 21st century modern National Theatre, whilst never forgetting what brought it to where it is.
Yeah, I think that's right. And so sometimes it's incredibly liberating and thrilling to stand on the shoulders of all the artists who've made this the world famous theatre that it is. That's equally paralysing, I think, for a lot of artists. And one of the advantages of not being so steeped in the culture, is we're not as kind of daunted, perhaps, as some of our pals here now are about, people crying at the thought of being on that stage. Not euphemistically, people crying at the thought that they will now be on that stage, and it's incredibly precious. That feeling that everyone has, and so but it's how to harness that and say, it's not people like us that run a national theatre, it's us. It's people like in this room, right? You don't have to have an Edwardian frock coat to start it, but there's still something in the head that we have to kind of liberate, and that's one of the advantages of National Theatre of Scotland. Someone said, you pioneered the model of a theatre without walls. So much pioneering is making up as you go along, and maybe that's pioneering, and maybe. But to be able to liberate the artists here and say, man, you are the best. You really are. The artists here are unbelievably good. And I don't know what it is that's stopping the world taking note. There was a time when the Abbey spoke, literally the world would pay attention. We have to put it back there and go much further, and we can do that. Now that'll not just be himself and me; that'll be us collectively. It's like all hands to the pump. And so this idea that rather 19th century idea of, well, it was led by this person and this person. It would never there's no such thing. They didn't do it on their own. There was a team of people, and I can see some of our pals and peers and collaborators here in the room. We do it together. It's not a single vision, and I think that's the challenge that I think we have to embrace. I think it's the biggest challenge that faces us as a theatre culture here in Ireland.
And the other real challenge is finding out where the feuds are, which is really that's really extraordinary. That's a kind of daily lesson. That's a day. Oh God, we didn't realise, and it's great being from outside because you could completely play the daft lad years ago. So we had no idea.
Really? You went to university and married this. Oh right, okay. So that's why you don't talk.
No,
okay.
so it's interesting finding out all those relationships between things and trying to break it down, I suppose, and that kind of brings us neatly onto, so what are we planning to do that's different and new? We can show some slides. I did one while you were talking.
You've got the clicker.
No, I did it. I did a sneaky one. Then I just left it there.
Oh,
though.
nice. Listen, I like your style. It's good.
So you start, and I'll do the slideshow for the first few minutes. And then,
What we're going to do?
Yeah.
All right.
I'm going to do the slideshow.
Right. Okay. Well, maybe not talk through all of the.
No.
But
the basic some principles.
The principle. Okay. We're on. The principle is really pretty straightforward. It was like there was a sense when we got here that we got a sense that people would say things like, "Well, the sector theatre gets 12 million euro." And the Abbey gets 6 of that 12 million. And then there's a kind of, this thing goes on. And and then you go, well, this is brilliant. We all have 12 million. How are we going to spend it together? And if you take that as an approach and you say, well, so shall we collaborate? You have ideas and aspirations, but maybe don't have enough money. Can we help? Can we support? Can we co-produce? Can we invite you in and work with you? And of course, each of those.
Or you have a brilliant show that's hardly been seen, but and you can't afford to do it again. So how can we help you do that? How can we help you put it back on its feet? And then give it another life.
And each relationship is bespoke, and because each project should be bespoke. Again, we'd inherited a system that was like a repertory system, which was, well, I don't mean this disparagingly, because it works in a way. It's like, well, there are 6 shows.
Why do you do that voice when you do go into that thing?
It's my grown-up voice.
Oh, sorry.
My grown-up
sorry.
There are 6 shows grown-up voice. I'm an actor, you see. And
you can see why that didn't work.
Shame on you. And so 6 shows, and they would each have like 13 actors, and they would big set, and it would run for like a couple of months, 6 weeks. Fergus, how long? 6 weeks. 6 weeks. And then there'd be a couple of weeks where we'd take another one, and then we'd
do it
again, and that's kind of good and kind of works, but. Yeah, big bit of me we just were like, and because that would prohibit the kind of bespoke thing where you see, Arlington, that was amazing. Can we do it? Shall we do it? And for a week, 10 days, how long? And if you start to say, because what was happening was the programme shape was defining the choices of plays. So the Abbey was starting to ask questions of the artists and of projects. Well, does it have 13 actors? I'm doing the voice again. And can it run for 6 weeks?
Which kind of rules out Ender Walsh,
it rules
for example.
out so much.
See what I did then?
Nicely done.
Which rules out that kind of work. And then you say, so why has Ender Walsh never been on the main stage of the Abbey Theatre? Because Ender's work is very particular, but very brilliant. But it doesn't fit that model. And not only does Ender's work not fit that model, but Dublin by Lamplight doesn't fit that model.
Do the thing.
Or the train, I didn't even know what was coming up next. Or the train doesn't fit that model. And it just meant, and it was genuinely about us inviting people in. It really was. I mean, as far as we knew, the Corn Exchange, for example, had no specific plan to do Dublin by Lamplight, but I'd seen it in Edinburgh in 2006, and it was a revelation, that great production. And it was kind of like, why? So we knew Annie a little, and we had a meeting, and we danced around each other, and she pitched a few new ideas, and we just were dying to say, would you do Dublin by Lamplight again? And she was like, oh my God, I thought you were never going to ask. And for them to do that show, a show about an alternative story of the creation of the National Theatre on the stage of the National Theatre seemed kind of obvious. But what we hope is that, it isn't just as, oh well, somebody else has made a brilliant show, let's put it on the Abbey. We're not going to be a receiving house. That is not the model of what we are doing. But what we wanted to do, and there was both pragmatism, financial and time in terms of this first year, was the Abbey does get €6 million, but that 6 million gets swallowed up remarkably quickly by running that building on Abbey Street and some other things. So we're trying to make the most we can of that money, and also bring the drawbridge up a little bit and let some of those really great artists like Ender Walsh, like Annie Ryan, like Lynn Parker, who've had very limited access to the Abbey stage, particularly the Abbey main stage, to get on that stage. So, that works alongside, and I think that's we hope is good for audiences, because we hope it gives an audience a chance to say, well, I never saw him. Arlington only played in Galway for a couple of weeks of the Galway Festival. It may have come to Dublin at some point, but we were able to go and make it happen much quicker, I think, and
financing it
and finance it and create a relationship with the company making it that feels much more collaborative. And that's kind of, I think, going to be key to what we're doing. But alongside that, we're also, Druid come back to the main stage of the Abbey for the first time in a very long time with their brilliant production. But also then it gave us time, that by doing that for the first 6 months, it gave us time to work on what we were going to do in terms of what the Abbey's own work is. And we're starting to look at that. And we've kind of been, I'll say it before it gets said back to us, we've slightly been pilloried for some of the work we're doing in our first year is work that either comes from existing materials, like films or books. It won't always be that. That was just coincidental. But we were making our own work on the Abbey stage, as well as animating the Peacock, which I know has been, for people in Dublin, has been a real frustration, that the Peacock seems to kind of limp between being closed and being open and being closed and being open. And we really wanted to get to a place where we could have it running the whole year round. So from the end of this month, when Pat Kinnivan comes in with his trilogy, the Peacock will also be running right through the year with self-produced, co-produced and presented work. And that's kind of the model. I think will always be a bit of both of those things, or more than two things, all of those things, because I think that's what audiences want, and I think that's what a national theatre should be presenting.
It's all allowed. Often when you go to an organisation, there's a kind of rule book that no one's quite written down, but it kind of is there about what we do, and it's all allowed. It's okay. So, for instance, you go back one. We would talk about the 2 pints. Literally, Neil's kitchen table, when we were thinking about doing, would be going up for the job, and what the things we could do. And we were like, right, we should do. It's Ireland. We should do a show in pubs, and that's a big open goal right there. Whereas everyone, they're in the pubs, but also at the heart of that is what we talk about in the social and political kind of belief structure that we have, which is, we really mean it when we say, if Roddy Doyle's production or our production of Roddy Doyle's 2 pints, if that goes on to be a big, commercial success, the important thing is that it's out there in tiny little village pubs where your mum and dad go and say, yeah, I saw your man Gleeson in that thing, and it was very Abbey.
He's not in it. That's fantasy, Kath. He's not in it.
Wouldn't let him. But I saw that. I saw that at my boozer. Your mother and I, we saw that, and that was our national theatre, and they did it here first. They did it for us. And it's the same when we do Jimmy's Hall. Jimmy's Hall is about a farmer who opens a community hall in Leitrim. To not do it in a community hall in Leitrim in some shape or form seems wrong. That's what we should be doing. And the 19th century model would say, oh, well, we'd do it in Dublin and put on a matinee so that they could get down from Leitrim and get back. No. If you're a national theatre, you have to be truly national. And so those are a couple of examples of the social and political. Katie Roach. When we talk about Katie Roach, again, there's a lot of talk in Ireland about the Irish canon. And I don't know who quite anoints the work that goes into the canon. And it's almost certainly by default. It'll be audience numbers or something, or cast sizes that make things, done again and again and again. And Katie Roach, it's a remarkable play. I read it and thought, this is like a kind of, it's definitely proto-feminist, but it's like Lorca meets Ibsen. it's set in rural Ireland. This is an amazing play, and Teresa Deevy was the one. She was when the Abbey took the work to the States in the I can't remember the year. I'm going to get it wrong, and the people here will know better. But
30s,
it was really as much about, yes, we've got these old guys, but we have Teresa Deevy, and she's the voice. And people were saying, this is genius. Now, there's a lot of debate, and we're trying to get to the heart of it, but as to why that relationship broke down. But that's part of the canon, and it should be part of the canon. And so one of the things that we talked about was, with the canon, what about all the plays, and this is a good example of what about all the plays that were fantastic, a great play, but just happened to be sandwiched between two productions of Ploughing the Stars that season, and so consequently didn't quite get the purchase. And so we've been starting to reinvestigate the canon with that in mind. If that makes sense.
Okay, 1343. We must take some questions. Otherwise, we'll have to keep talking.
We said we wouldn't talk enough.
I know. I knew you would.
Do you have a programme for new writing? Because I know a lot of writers in Ireland the Abbey would not be the first call to go to the Royal Court before we send anything, because we know we have to wait a year and a half. So is there anything
Yes.
to do?
Yes. No. We genuinely, our ambition would be certainly to have a new play on the main stage of the Abbey in 2018 for a start, just as a starting point. No, and
but there are.
There is some new work there, but there's new work in the Peacock. There's new work in the Peacock, but I think we have to get away from that fear of new plays on the Abbey stage. We talk about this a lot, and I think it's partly to do with the history and legacy, but the Abbey it's less than a 500-seat theatre. It's not the Royal Albert Hall. It's a middle-scale theatre. Now, it's got an extraordinary story and extraordinary legacy, but if in the National Theatre of Ireland you can't sustain a new play on a 500-seat theatre for 4 or 5 weeks, we're doing something seriously wrong. And we have to address that. So we are addressing that. And most of our time at the moment is meeting new, writers of new plays, and then really sifting what's there already, what's been commissioned and hasn't been produced, which is another shelf to deal with of plays that are sitting there. Are they ready to go? Are some of them ready to go? Some of them are in the Peacock programme for this year now, but some we hope will be on the Abbey stage next year. And also breaking down that slightly false division between the Peacock and the Abbey. I think there's a sense that, the Abbey is the Premier League and the Peacock's kind of Division 1. I think we need to slightly go, no, the right play is in the right space. Mm-hmm. And if the Peacock is the right place for both a classic play or a new play, so be it. But similarly, the Abbey stage can also be the right place for a new play. And we have to be bold enough and brave enough to think that play is good enough to do that. And in a sense, having Ender's work there, it's not brand new in that sense. It's been produced before. But, Arlington ran for 3 weeks, Ballyturk for 2. So you've had 5 weeks of Ender Walsh. And, over the piece, they did around 70%. Audiences came to see it and wanted to see it. So I don't think audiences are afraid of new work on the Abbey stage at all. In fact, I'm encouraged by your nodding. So we need lots of
but
nodding.
But also, it's not just about writers; it's about ideas. Because we talk about this all the time. As theatre makers, we say, well, it's all about collaboration. Well, so if you are, and this is a call out to anyone listening here, which is that if you are an artist, a theatre maker, whether you're a choreographer, or a dramaturg, or an actor, and you have an idea for a show, we have to also, as a National Theatre, be able to be porous enough and responsive enough to be able to take those ideas. And certainly that's how we did it at National Theatre Scotland. It was not to the exclusion of just the writers absolutely, but not not just the writers. There are many artists who say, I have a great idea for a show. I'm not a writer. And you say, well, okay, do you have a writer in mind? Can we put a team together to create the work? And that is a valid and valuable way of making work alongside the more traditional writing programs, which of course we have. But
David, yeah.
Hi, Eve Courtney. I'm on the board of Dance Ireland.
Hiya.
And just to say who I am. One of the things I thought was really, really amazing in the last few years was to see dance on the main stage of the Abbey, and that's a really important part of the Abbey's history. Actually, is the Abbey's School of Dance. And to see Trisha Brown's work there was really powerful. But for me, seeing Liz Roach on the main stage was like a real sense of the circle being completed.
Absolutely.
To see really astonishing standard, but also Irish-made work. And I was just wondering if you had more thoughts on
We
how
do. We've got lots of plans.
We
We're
do,
talking to
yeah.
a lot of
I
artists.
mean, it's great having like Benjamin here as well from the dance festival in the city. So we're talking to him a lot. But also, just having Una Doherty's piece in Arlington. That piece held the Abbey stage for 20 minutes. And so we're talking to Una. We're developing a new piece of work with her. Very much so. And it goes back to that thing I was saying before about that slightly false division of artists. And certainly in National Theatre of Scotland, we would work, pretty much every show would have a choreographer attached to that show as a lead artist.
Yeah.
Whether
Not someone to come in and do a dance routine.
Not to do that 3-minute section of the show, but to actually be part of the team. So whether it was Stephen Hoggett or Vicky Manderson, we worked a lot with the people from Frantic Assembly. That became a bit of a touchstone for us. But there were other people as well. Imogen Knight worked on Our Ladies of Perpetual Succor with us. And so we see both dance being both integral to the work that we will make, and indeed music as well, but also making the Abbey stage available for those great ideas that come from the dance community, particularly the Irish dance community. So it's very much part of what we're thinking.
It's all allowed.
Hello, I don't know if the mic's working. Hi.
It is.
I'm Jen, I study drama at Trinity. Lots of us are here today.
Hello, Trinity.
Very fancy. Recently, I was really excited by seeing Tomboy Survival Guide on the programme because I think it's amazing that it's by a non-binary trans person and it's on the Peacock stage. That's really important and that's really reflecting Ireland today. How did you consider a sort of notion that happens with the Abbey of an older, more privileged, more middle-class audience and pandering to them, catering? Catering to them. How did you?
I don't think anyone would ever identify themselves as such. You might look at them and say, "Yes, you're clearly an old middle-class person," and they're like, "I don't think so. I'm thrusting and young and
two voices. It's brilliant, isn't it? That was like
damn
a conversation.
Your eyes, man. Damn your eyes. And so the heart of this is we have to build, break down all these preconceptions. There is no such thing as an audience. It's a collective on the night. It doesn't just it's not like we've all decided to go to the theatre, all 500 of us together. No, you all can show up, and it's the discourse, and it's those impossible encounters between the young trans person and the old High Court judge. That's a night out. That's a play, write it. And
it's a scandal waiting to happen.
And so it's our job to create the environment where those impossible encounters can happen.
But it's about both the programme and the environment. I think that's the key thing. I think you have to get a sense of that the Abbey should not be an intimidating place to come. You should feel free. I think, and in fairness to the Abbey, always the Abbey pricing is remarkably low compared to other theatres, even in Ireland, even in Dublin, it's low. But if you compare that to what's happening in the UK now, it's incredibly well priced, but pricing isn't the only barrier. The barrier is more about, will I feel welcome there? Is it the kind of work I want to see there? So we are doing things around that. We're introducing free previews for our own productions where literally it's turn up on the night and everybody pile in. Just try and break down some of that formality of the space as much as of the work. But I think in the end, we'll be judged by the program, and that's the whole year, and it's a lot more than usual. And we hope there's genuinely a real range of things, and we're not coming in to say we're going to ignore everything that's ever happened before. We're doing, Ulysses is in the program, Katie Roach is in the program, Beckett's in the program. So it is a genuine attempt to give a broader picture as we can, whilst making it feel different.
Hi, my name is Niamh. I'm a theatre maker and a writer. I have an actual circus theatre company called Ether, and I've made shows. And I suppose what I'd like to ask is that you mentioned the words intimidating. Mm-hmm. Definitely, the Abbey would be an intimidating concept, the idea of approaching that. And I suppose my question is, how possible is it to come to you with questions? Because I have shows that I've created that have been successful, and literally, to be honest, just hearing you speak now for the first time, I've actually thought, oh, could one of my shows be on your stage? But I don't know. I don't even know how to begin that conversation. And I suppose you always feel the pressure that if you come to, well, something that you really want, that you should already have all of the answers, and you should be prepared, and everything should be done. I mean, all I would really have is questions at this stage. So, how do I approach that? Have
you tried emailing? And that sounds glib. I don't mean it like that. You could email. That would be one thing. And because it's your national theatre. It's yours. It's about you. And if you as an artist are not feeding it, it will die. So you need to engage with it. And there's a very practical thing that we've put in, which is you could historically always through the website you could click on the email address that would, if you had written a play. But now we've got a thing which is ideas at Abbey Theatre. And so if you have an idea, write it down. And we've written a couple of kind of stimulus questions for you to answer, so that we could at least start that conversation.
But honestly, lots of that program came from people asking us questions, and just, I think genuinely, it sounds glib, but kind of what you see is what you get. Afraid so. Yeah. We will talk to people. We talk to people all the time. We're out at work all the time. We genuinely want to have conversations.
Great. Thank you very much.
Come and see us.
Hi, my name is Fenna. I'm a fourth-year drama student, and obviously because of that I'm now thinking about my future. And I know that other theatres like National Theatre in London and Donmar and so on, they have a lot of internships for students or people who are generally interested. Is that something that you could imagine introducing in the Abbey? Yes.
We already do.
Great.
Although not slave labour internships, I think.
Okay.
No,
yeah.
I think there's a fine line between people.
Yeah.
The internship industry in the UK in film and theatre industry has got a little out of hand. I think it's about finding the right level to give people an opportunity to come in, but then finding them genuine working opportunities as well. But
again, you should, and also as Trinity students, get down, come and say hi, come along, and that's how to do it, really.
Some good seats still available for most things.
Oh. No, but they want to hear you.
It's on. Yeah.
There we go. Hello.
Hello.
I was just discussing with Ellie before we came into this, pieces like Black Watch that I saw, which was an incredible piece of theatre for what I saw, and I was wondering if, as theatre makers first and now the directors of the Abbey, how important you feel that the pieces interrogate our history directly and show people that somebody is listening, especially post Waking the Feminists. Sorry.
Good question.
No, it's a good question.
Very good
how explicit is that? The question is how explicit should we be? I think it depends on the project and the artists leading it. If someone says, I really, and there's a couple of things coming up. We should maybe flag it up.
Yeah.
We said So we've called the overall season "What Happens Next Is This," and we've got 3 little shows that are going to happen in the Peacock, and we've called it "What's Happening Now." Now, yeah, and basically that's a little mini season.
You spent days thinking of that, obviously.
And that's a little mini season of work which is explicitly about the social and political context that Ireland finds itself in.
The 3 issues now, but. You know, we would love somebody to come with the idea that would lead, to a Black Watch or whatever that says, okay, but that's about the right artist coming with the right idea.
It's the idea.
The idea drives. That's what drove that piece. Was a newspaper article actually drove Black Watch. That's what.
And so the bespoke program of development that you create for the idea in the end is what. The outcomes of that is what you see. Does that make any sense?
The short answer is yes. It has to. That would be a failure if in relatively short time somebody doesn't come up with, given the political context we're living in, not just in Ireland but around us, somebody's got to have that great idea.
And we as an organisation
have to deliver it.
Have to
facilitate it.
Yeah, exactly. Be flexible enough and responsive enough. Good be in touch.
First of all, can I say you are 2 very nice men?
Thank you. Okay.
To me, that's very important, and I wish you the best of luck in your reign in the great Abbey Theatre.
Thank you.
I just want to say there's so many questions one could ask you.
We'll not let you. There's going to be
one.
I'm the nice one. We're nice guys, but I'm nicer than he is.
And I don't know if there's a central theme here today. I have been listening. I'm curious about a number of things, and I'll just talk maybe very, very fast. The Abbey location, before you guys arrived, it was in the news a few years ago that we're going to be moving.
Yep.
We, I believe, in Ireland are very generous people. Have you considered fundraising?
We're on it. Do you have any money?
No. I'll give you a few quid.
Yeah, okay, yeah. We're on it. But we're staying in the same location, though. We do now own the building next to us, so we are definitely looking to redevelop. We have no time frame for that, though.
But just to move on, sorry for interrupting you. Just to move on, the great Abbey players. Where are they now? Will they ever come back? And finally, are there limits to theatre? I'm not a theatre student. I am a cultural events organiser. Mm-hmm. I have, for the past 17 years, been organising free, public, interdisciplinary lectures. And I would be very interested, I know there'll be a lot of people knocking on your door after today, especially having the facility of a 500-seat theatre. So basically, are there limits to theatre? I don't know.
No.
You have had lectures in the past.
Yeah. We do all the time.
All the time.
Quite often.
We do. We will.
By the way, that was 4 questions in one. So I hope you can remember some of those questions. Okay.
The building, I think we kind of explained that our plan. I think we want to stay in that location. I think the history of that part of the city is important, and I think and how the Abbey responds to its location is important. Mm-hmm. The Abbey players, I think it's unlikely there will be a full-time ensemble company of actors. I think, however, there is a generation of brilliant Irish actors who are emerging. We know the older Irish actors who are extraordinary. I think there's a new generation emerging. I'm sure some are in this room now. So we very much hope that the Abbey will be a place where those actors take their place. In terms of lectures, yes, we're really, again, if it's about a really great idea that's interested in the Abbey, we will do everything we can to make the Abbey accessible for those things. That was three answers. Fundraising, we are, well, the fundraising,
give us a couple of quid.
Yes, it is starting. Yeah, and we'll take your money.
We'll take your money.
Yes.
I think we have one last question. Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Annie. I'm also final year drama with Fana. Just going back to when you were talking about the What's Happening Now trilogy, which I think is really exciting, and I was just wondering how you're structuring that. Like, have you already approached the artists and like what?
So the artists approached us basically, and two approached us, and we approached one another for just ideas that was. I mean, on one of them, I will not tell you what it is, but one of them was on the opening night of Arlington. Was it? Yeah, it was the opening night of Arlington. Yeah. There was an artist there who said, "Listen, we really have to do something about blah." And 10 minutes later said the same thing to himself, and the next day we have
to do something about that. And so him, and we called him and did it that day, agreed it in a day.
Done.
So I think that can be the speed of things. Not everything is going to happen like that, but I think theatre has to, and the Abbey has to, have the ability to respond urgently as well. I think theatre is an amazing art form, but sometimes it takes too long to respond, and by the time you respond, it's gone. And we have to be able to, we have to have the mechanisms to occasionally move really quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And it did. Historically, it did. And that's one of the great, brilliant things that it has been able to do in its history. So we want to find simple, practical things to be able to do that.
Right. I think we've run out of time.
We have.
Yes, we have. We've run out of time. And I want to thank you both for a wonderfully open and personal and honest discussion. And I'd like the audience to join me in welcoming you to Dublin.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.